excited to welcome the founding member, one of the founding members of Motley Crue, not to mention a New York Times bestselling author, Nikki Sixx, who has recently released a new memoir called The First 21, How I Became Nikki Sixx, as well as a greatest hits package with his band, 6 a.m. Nikki, I'm so excited to welcome you to the show. Thank you so much for hanging out.
Thank you. I'm excited to talk to you. And before we started the show, we have a couple business ventures we're going to develop, and then but you know that's behind the scenes. Let's
Exactly. I'm all about inventing, that's for sure. The first question I have for you, because I just finished the book, it was absolutely stunning, and I wanted to start with what motivated you to write this book. Was it being stuck at home with the pandemic?
It was I've had 3 books, New York Times bestsellers, and it's something that I know I'll always do. And I had started this idea a while ago where I wanted to write a very short financial book to help athletes, actors, musicians, entrepreneurs that come from nothing and then get like the big contract, and then you hear about them a few years later and they're bankrupt. And I have a theory, and we have a way of managing my finances my whole life so that I can have security. Because of security, I can continue to write books, do poetry, do heavy metal, have side band, right? So the idea is for a basketball player to have security so he can continue to have a long career. Then one day I was sitting there and I realized that's not a very sexy book. Maybe I'll do that maybe when I'm 75 or something like that. So then I started like thinking, I love writing books. Poetry book came back up again. And we had sold our house in Los Angeles and had moved to Wyoming, which is 45 minutes from Idaho, which is where I grew up and which is where all the dreaming started. And I could literally drive to my hometown and I could be there by 6 o'clock today. It's not that far away where all the dreams started. And I started going back, and I started asking myself questions like, where did everybody go? What did they do with their lives? Like, remember those memories? I remember that first girlfriend holding hands and going to the soda shop. Remember my best friend and discovering Deep Purple, all these coming of age discoveries, and then discovering like an instrument, and all of a sudden the actual core of who I am is I'm a writer. So I started applying words to music, and then I accidentally became a songwriter. And because I like fashion and style and pushing the envelope in my writing, even I applied that to music. And so we get to it was fun for me to go back and watch that chain of events in the 70s in Hollywood. The 70s in Hollywood were magic, man. It was like no band sounded the same. You had boogie bands, you had disco bands, you had punk rock. There was an amazing, cool thing that I got to experience coming from a small town, Santa Monica Boulevard, which is, runs parallel to Sunset Boulevard and Hollywood Boulevard. And Santa Monica Boulevard was the way that you came in from the valley and you drove across. And on Friday and Saturday and Sunday nights, you'd have all these men and women who would be like in spandex and roller skating and like, I'm gay, I'm proud. This is like 1975, right? And then you end up at the punk rock underground club. And these guys are slashing themselves with razor blades. And then you go to some weird club house in the Hollywood Hills, and there's like a heavy metal band playing at 4 o'clock in the morning in a backyard. My brain, and then reading these authors that I was so into, like Bukowski and Kerouac and all these type of people, it was a great petri dish for dreams.
Now, when you were writing this book, did you discover things, or like, did you surprise yourself about stuff that maybe you had conceptions about when you were younger? And did you learn something about yourself that's maybe helped you be more at peace with your early life?
Well, you discover good and bad about yourself if you're willing to be open. And one of the things that I've always known about myself, but I never could really connect the breadcrumbs was because my mom and my dad vacated at such a young age, and I had a sister who was born with Down syndrome, and she was, story I told, she was taken from us. Now I understand she needed to live in a facility. My mom was not capable of taking care of a child with Down syndrome and me, and she was probably at that time only 22 years old, 23 years old, and my dad left. So I learned through that detachment and through moving. We moved. My grandfather worked his ass off. He was heading out the door before the sun came up with his coffee and came home at night, dog tired, and never complained. I learned from that man, you work harder than anybody else, you never complain. But we moved a lot. So I was always the new kid. So I developed this shyness. Earlier in my life, you would see pictures out. My hair was always in my eyes. I was kind of withdrawn. Drugs worked great for me because it helped me get out of my own way. But what I learned was detachment. And it's not good that I can cut something off and never look back. It allowed me to go, that guy doesn't work, cut, get a new guy. That guy doesn't work in my idea of a band that's going to sell out a stadium, cut, move on, keep doing better, write better songs, rewrite the lyrics. So I never looked back. I only looked forward. And I look at it now and I'm like, man, the balls on that kid. I mean, Jesus Christ. But I learned it, it was learned behavior. And I guess I never really thought, I slept on a lot of couches and a few parks, not like I could call myself homeless or anything, but it gave me great empathy for homeless people. But I learned a lot about myself along the way that was really good, and stuff that I'm now trying to apply myself and work on better. Book's been very cathartic for me, and be honest with you, I wrote it for my family.
And what has the response been like from your kids and your wife and maybe some cousins and all that kind of stuff?
All positive, they're like, God, I remember those times, or I remember when I was 21. My daughter Frankie's, who's gonna be 21 coming up, said, it's so interesting for me to be reading about your first 21 when I'm in my first 21. And then like my aunt, my uncle, and they're in their late 80s and 90s, and they're reading it and reminds them of their youth, but also of that time in our family. So it is a prequel. It is some version of a I don't know. I think it's just really like a lot of people's story. I don't really feel it's just my story.
I wanted to ask you too, now that you have, you moved obviously to so many different places, you ended up in LA for many years. Now you've returned, not back to your original state, but pretty close.
Yeah.
When you're living at home now back in Wyoming, because the world knows you as Nikki Sixx for the most part, but when you're back now where you are you Nikki or are you Frank?
I mean, I'm Nikki because that's the name I go by, but there's definitely a big part of Frank in me. When I take my truck and I head out into nothingness, driving down a dirt road for 20 miles, I just happen to be listening to Exile on Main Street, and the windows are down and my fishing pole's hanging out the back window. And there's like the same kid that was, the same Frank, right? But I am myself. This is the confusing part. Don't try to make me feel like a psycho, but I did, write the book as my former self and myself. And originally, um, us creatives can sometimes like get in our own way. I wanted to write the book only as Frank Ferrana.
Okay.
And even the publisher's like, that's cool, but a lot of people aren't going to get it. They don't, right? It's going to be confusing. So we decided to co-write it together, which was fun because I would be like, in the early years, being Frank, but then turning into Nikki Sixx, even through all the name changes. And it was really important to me that my family really helped me to find these photos. We all got these awkward photos. I know you got them too, so don't lie.
I do.
I mean, the awkward photos are so great because it shows that we all come from, being kids and dreamers and doing all this stuff, and we have this awkward phase, and then we turn into adults, and I wanted to show not just like me on stage with the flamethrower, man. Woo! It's like, yeah, that's fucking rad. Let me tell you, nothing like holding on to a flamethrower in front of 100,000 people. But I also was like, basically, there's this one picture in the book makes me laugh so hard. It's with my first girlfriend, Susie, and we both got glasses on. My grandfather finally let go of his reins that I would have a flat top for the rest of my life, haircut. And I was growing my hair out. And man, I thought I was the bee's knees. I thought I was the coolest kid in school. I was on the football team. I had a girlfriend, and I look back, look like a serial killer. There's nothing sexy about that because that's that awkward age,
Very much so. And something that struck me as I was reading the book, I feel like you and I, and bear with me because I realize this probably sounds a bit strange, but I feel like you and I are a bit of kindred spirits because I come from a farming family just north of Montreal, and I was like the lone creative really in the family. I went off to Toronto to school, lived there for several years, and did the big city life, the whole thing, but then was really happy to come back to I live 12 minutes from the farm now, out where I am.
Yeah.
And I love that I was able to go do my creative thing. I'm still a radio announcer, here in Montreal. So I go do that in the city, but then I get to come back out to this beautiful landscape. And I feel like when I was reading the book, I feel like you've done that too. Like you were in Idaho and obviously these beautiful places in Texas. Then you spent years in LA and now you're back out in Wyoming.
Yeah.
Was that did you think you'd end up back where you are, Nikki, to be out in the beauty?
I didn't, but we spent a lot of time in tour buses in my life and be driving out across the country, and I'd be, thinking back on how much I missed it, but I didn't really, I had children. They weren't 18 yet. I was divorced. So my option would be abandon my kids and move to the country and milk cows, or I could stay and be present as a father, as hard as it is also being a musician and traveling. And then later in life could make some decisions. And it just kind of happened with the pandemic and the riots in LA and their school shootings. And I know that this couple were talking to me about their teenage kids, and that they were online looking for bulletproof backpacks. The school's about to start. And that was right before me and my wife, Courtney, had, we had to strategically plan the pregnancy around touring, because last thing I want to be is in Detroit going, thank you, Detroit. And my wife's giving birth, So we planned it so we would be able to have the experience together. I could tour, I could be home. And I said to her, we should really think about if this is where we want to raise our child when you get pregnant. And then the pandemic happened. And somewhere in there in the last 5 years, we had talked about a getaway house, a cabin, someplace in Canada, maybe Montana, change of season. And as we were sitting there, it just kept boiling down and what we were looking for. And we found exactly what we're looking for in Wyoming. And there's also some good stuff about here is small town. No one gives a rat's ass who you are. If you're a jackass, you're known as the town jackass. If you're a good person, everybody's on first name basis. And I could jump on a plane and be in Los Angeles, be in band rehearsal in an hour and a half. There's being out of the city has got us to think about, again, with the pandemic, hey, let's fly over to Denver and see a Broncos game. Hey, let's go to Bozeman, Montana, and horseback up into the mountains and fly fish at a lake. It's got us out of living in LA and like you're on the 405 and the 101 and you're stuck in traffic and you live in your bubble. And even though everything's there, it's so congested. And a lot of stuff started happening. A friend of mine was, he's a business guy and he's having a meeting and he was in Beverly Hills. And these four guys went into the restaurant and they just opened gunfire. A couple of people died. And this is a guy with, just a guy, my neighbor where I used to live. And it's just, I don't know, man. I needed a change. But the good news is, starting in June, I'll be on a tour bus again, and I'll be in New York, I'll be in Montreal, I'll be in Toronto, I'll be in Chicago. So kind of like what you are saying about your life, I get the best of both worlds,
That's amazing. And how excited are you to be back out on the road? Because I know that the stadium tour was planned before pandemic and then everything had to be backed up. Where is Nikki Sixx feeling about training and getting ready to go and hit the road and see your fans who cannot wait to see you guys?
Well, I started training, I started the long process. I'll be honest with you, a lot of people are like, man, I love training. I don't like it. I mean, it's hard work and I owe it to my fans to look the best, to have the most amount of energy as a performer. So yeah, I'm in that process now. Right before, this is how serious I take it. Right before the pandemic hit, when we still lived in Los Angeles, my wife wanted to go to a movie. So she's like, so we pick a movie and we go, and she knows I can't eat the buttered popcorn. She knows I can't do it, not for my goal. I'm very goal oriented as a human being. So she orders some, whatever some nachos, and she got like something, the usual stuff we get. And I had a bag with 8 almonds in it.
Oh my God.
8 almonds, because that's what my, nutritionist, what I was, the amount of protein and carbs and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm in that now, and I'll be ready. I'll be ready.
Good. Will you have like some kind of fun at Christmas, like maybe some chocolate, or no?
Oh, Christmas don't count.
Okay, good. Okay,
Neither did Thanksgiving.
I agree.
When I was younger, I heard this saying we've all heard, everything in moderation. And I was like, moderation? Like, me and Tommy had this ritual where at 5 o'clock, we got our bottle of Jack Daniels. We took the lid off, like this lid, and we flip it like that. You flip it, and we'd say, won't be needing that again. And we'd do 5 bubbles for 5 o'clock. And that's how the day started. That bottle never needed its lid, nothing in moderation, rock and roll. But, as like I've, been around for a moment, I try to throw myself 1,000% into what I'm passionate about: training, getting back into shape, the best shape for touring musically, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Getting the stage right, getting the sound right, getting the video projections right, throwing yourself in. but you need to also like have fun with it, you know? So, you know, cheat day every now and then, go off the rails every now and then. But I think in general, if you really apply yourself to what you love and believe in, and give yourself a little break here and there, you're better for it.
Nikki, do you find that your work ethic from your grandparents and even when you were playing football helps you achieve this goal of getting in shape and getting ready for on tour? Like, is that part of you?
Yeah, it's definitely something that has just been in me forever. I, it's these funny stories. I'm sure some of your listeners are like, that guy's crazy. But I remember once we were fly fishing on the Snake River, and I the fly came back, the hook came back and caught me in my finger. I don't know, I must have been 8 years old, right? I'm like, I I got a hook in my finger, and I'm in the middle of the Snake River, and my grandfather says, pull it out, stop complaining, and put the line back in the water. And you know, that's kind of like how you gotta do it, man. Shit happens. You get a fucking hook in your finger, like pull it out, put the line back in the water, man. It's like what you got to do. You have to work harder than anybody else, or they're going to outwork you and you're going to be second. And my old manager said to me, if you're a sled dog, you don't want to be second. I think we can all figure out what that means. You know what I mean?
Now, as a radio announcer, I have to ask you this because I read this in the book and this warmed my heart that you really loved being on the radio. Can you explain why you love being on the radio and will you do more of it in the future?
I had 8 years, loved it, loved interviewing people, loved exploring with artists, things like what we're doing right now. We had a lot of fun. We laughed a lot. And I got to help break a lot of bands. I had a great deal with iHeart where they said, you know, if it's something I really believe in, I had a certain number of times I could play said band. And there was bands like AWOL Nation when they came out, and I jumped on that Sail song and pounded it. And it felt nice to see it being picked up other places. Greta Van Fleet, the list, the Struts, the list goes on and on and on. I like that because that reminded me of when I was a kid and I'd be listening to the radio and the guy's like, yeah, this is this band Aerosmith and we're going to play that song again at 5 o'clock. And I'd just be like, wow, you know. But I also used to call in Jerome, Idaho, my local radio station, and request songs. And just to confirm that I'm an annoying human being, there was this song I was really into called Big Bad John by Jimmy Dean. And that song told a story. And I was already writing short stories. So I was like, oh, wow, this story. So I'd call and say, could you play the song? And then they would play it and it would come out of the speakers. I'd be like, what the is this magic? This is magic. Where are these people? Are they on the moon? Like, you know, I was a little kid. And then I would call right back again. This is why I know I'm an annoying friend. I'd say, hey, can you play that song again? They'd say, we can't play it till like tomorrow. But I just remember that interaction with like the DJs and the music. And I also had another experience where these kids were working on an old time radio and the tubes were out and they were doing something and it was coming in and out. I was really little. I was like 4 or 5, maybe 6. And all of a sudden I heard a voice go, oh, today at 5 o'clock. And I was like, where is that voice coming from? So then came the interviews. Like I was being interviewed by people like you and would hear my own interview on the radio. And when the opportunity came to do my own radio show, I jumped at it. It was just great. I just loved it. But to be honest with you, I had Motley Crue. I have 4 kids. I'm married. I have 6 a.m. Both those bands tour, making records for each thing, writing books, doing documentaries. I I had finally burnt myself out. I'd finally burnt myself up where I would wake up in the morning and I would look at my to-do list and my cup of coffee and I'd be like, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not supposed to be feeling this burnout. So I kind of started chipping away, and I chipped away at the radio show, and that was great. And you know, I'm still so grateful for that opportunity, friends with everybody and my producers and co-hosts. And then now there's the wonderful world of podcasting, which I get a lot of, you know, offers for. So right now I am focused on, now that the book is done, I formed a company with a huge director in animation, and we're starting a company. It'll be for children, based around music, episodic, right? So it's something you would get on a Netflix. That's my first diving into that, kind of like when I first dove into radio. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I have good instinct. And each one of those shows is going to need an original song. So that's great. And then started working on a children's book with my wife. And that came out of the last US administration and how I just felt so bad for young people and kids, that they're being told that if you're different than me, if you're different, you're bad. And we wanted to have this story where this girl gets to kind of travel to different parts of the world and learn about culture and to pass that on to kids. And that might involve some music somehow. So that's kind of what's happening right now. And then I got that Motley Crue tour looming. And so podcasts, radio, I don't know. But I'm young. I'm not 80 yet. I'm close. You said I didn't look a day over 79 when you first saw me.
I think you look like you're 39 max. So I think you're good to go for a while.
Okay, good. As long
And I
as
know
the-
we're just about out of time. I just had a couple quick questions for your fans, maybe like quick answers for you. Are you still a big fan of the Minnesota Vikings?
I always have a little, like the Vikings will be on, you know, and I'll be like, I kind of, you know, it's like, it brings back that memory, but my friends give me a hard time. I change favorite football teams each season. It's like, I'm the worst. I'm liking the Rams right now. I was super happy. I was in LA in the 70s when we had the Rams, and I got to see some Ram games. That was cool for me. So I was stoked that we got them back. But, you know, I'm not an LA boy now, and Wyoming doesn't have a pro team.
Right.
We got a great high school team, though.
Good. And here's a quick question for you. Did the bass choose Nikki Sixx, or did Nikki Sixx choose the bass?
The first time I got my hands on an instrument was a gut string acoustic guitar that only had 3 strings on it. And I was given this by my stepdad, Ramon. And I remember he kind of showed me how to move my fingers around. And then I was like reading my short stories and moving my finger. And I was like, oh, this is the next step for what I want to do as a storyteller. So since it only had 3 strings, I feel like, what if it had had 6 strings?
Right.
But it only had 3. And I learned to write music from root notes. I still to this day use pretty much root notes, very simple riffs usually. I believe that, like, here's this idea, da 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 da, right? And then I have this idea. Well, you know, It's documented that I overdosed on drugs and that I'm sober now. So why don't I just be a little dick and write, when I get high on speed as the opening lyric, and then jump out and say, Top Fuel, Funny Car's the drug for me. That was just a real little punk rock fun idea. Take it into the band, and those guys are monsters, and Mick's like, and then I'm like, oh, well, that's what that's supposed to sound like. And then Tommy starts his thing and Vince puts his stamp on it. But it always kind of comes from very root oriented in lyrics.
Amazing. And a last question for your fans. What do your fans mean for you? Because again, in reading the book, I just feel like you have so much love for the people who've supported you for years and years, no matter what project you're doing. But I also feel like you're super reflective over your life. And I think you get it. Like, I think a lot of people don't get it, but I feel like you know, the amount of luck, like you said you had, but the hard work that you put in, and then you have so many fans that have followed you throughout all of it. So what do you want to say to them?
I don't really feel that special, to be honest with you. I feel that I do something and I'm super grateful that people either inspired by it or entertained by it or appalled by it. So I never take that for granted. I understand that I'm basically the same kid that had that little guitar with 3 strings on it and a notepad. And I met Tommy and Vince and Mick eventually, which I'm extremely grateful for. And we got to form a band, and a lot of my music and ideas was the fuel for that. But, they're equally part of that whole band and why we are who we are or continue to be who we are. So I'm super grateful as a human being, and I never take the fans for granted. I'd never take them for granted.
Awesome. Well, we don't take you for granted either. You're amazing. And it's been such an honor to, I used to have a picture of you guys in my locker when I was in grade 7. So my 13-year-old self can't believe I'm getting to interview Nikki Sixx. So thank you for being amazing.
Thank you. Good luck with the show. And thanks for taking time for me.
Hey, it's Kelly Alexander, and thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Kelly Alexander Show, so you are the first in line for all the cool content coming your way.